The ACN podcast is made possible thanks to the generosity of our listeners and sponsors, including the Agile Alliance. As a nonprofit membership organization, the Agile Alliance is an excellent resource to help you along your Agile journey. To learn more about the Agile Alliance and our other sponsors, as well as how you can become a sponsor or supporter of our show, please visit acnpodcast.org for more information. And thank you for your support. Okay, good morning and good evening, everyone. This is the Agile Coaching Network. This is brought to you by the Agile Alliance. Agile Alliance, if you don't know who we are, we're a nonprofit organization that started this whole Agile craziness roughly a decade or so ago. So with that, let me go ahead and get us started on the first segment, which is we're going to talk about these stories that we've collected through the Alliance in something called the Narrative Project. And what we've done is that we've reached out to the Agile community and we've asked open-ended question, which is, kind of tell us about your Agile adoption. And what happens is that people then respond with their story and they self-signify it to where it could be found within 1,000 stories. And this particular story is an exemplar of something that's going on within our community. It's been going on for a while because I've actually ran into it several times as well. And that is the way that this story is structured is it basically says, what about the code? We've been doing an Agile adoption for well over a year now, and it all seems to be focused on project management improvements. What about the code quality? Every time that we push to do refactoring or we want to do improvements in the way that we build code, our product owner and our management pushes back on us. Is this what Agile is? Is it just project management stuff? This particular individual sees this as a high concern, sees it as being common. It is a common story across a number of different stories that are very similar to this. It's about governance, and I assume that the governance is that we're doing it this way, and no, you don't have any input into that. Another interesting thing on this is the person thought if this story was read by their manager that the manager would disagree. Both the middle manager as well as the executive would disagree as well. To get us started on this, does anyone want to chime in on ways that we can dampen such stories from existing or coming into existence in the future?
Allow me to start, Ray. So one thought on this is one thing about Agile is always delivering a meaningful value and product to the customer. So refactoring code obviously is no end in itself. It makes the delivery to the customer better. And explaining this is probably an important thing to get the bridge right between doing better technical stuff and delivering the right thing to the customer. And if you can get this story transformed into we're going to deliver something better, it immediately changes. But Agile originates in software, so it's about software. There's a lot of stuff like definitions of done that do this, and sometimes, by the way, just don't ask for permission. If you want to change a method, sometimes maybe just do it and produce better code. Who would keep you from doing an additional peer review if that gets a better result in the end?
Right. Yeah, I noticed that at least in my old company that there was plenty of places I can go to get the word no. And, so, you got to be careful with that.
Hey, Ray, this is Linda.
Hey, Linda.
Linda Cook.
Yes.
Hi. I'd like to comment on this question.
Go for it.
Fundamentally, I think we have to change the entire conversation around refactoring. From my perspective, it is the way that code should be developed, right? You should always look to, every time you open up, I don't care if it's a method, whatever, every time you open something up, the first thing you should do is, how can I make an improvement in this code? And that's built into just the way you work and the way you practice. Now, doing that doesn't solve for some of the bigger issues where, somewhere along the way, you find this class that's a 1,200 line monster that just really needs to be dissected and truly just restructured, reorganized, refactored, all those things. And it's something that's going to take more time. So one of the techniques I've used with teams is once you've established some amount of trust with the product team, is to get an agreement that during each sprint, some allocation of effort can be on things that are technical in nature. Now, that might be refactoring. It could also be some learning activity. Perhaps it's a spike. But this is where I'd put those bigger efforts where you've got these, big ball of mud that needs to be dissected and cleaned up. And when you have those types of things, I think one of the challenges a lot of technical teams face is that they don't express the correction in business terms. They don't talk about it, that this is going to make code easier to maintain, which means it will take us less time to make an enhancement in this space next time we come back. It's also going to improve perhaps the security of the code, right? Perhaps it improves performance. And when you can get technicians to start to understand how to talk the language of the business, it's easier for them to understand. They're like, oh, okay, that makes sense to me. Yeah, we ought to do that, right? In really bad scenarios, I've even gone as far as convincing the business that this team needs a timeout. There's a bunch of technical work that needs to get caught up on, and we need a sprint that the technicians dedicate to, product performance, overall maintainability, enhancements, things like that.
Yeah, I've seen that as time goes on, velocity of the team starts to, get slower. That's sometimes a good sign of looking at, well, maybe we've got too much technical debt that we're pushing up against. Adam, do you have a comment on this?
Yes, well, I could just say what Linda said, +1, but sometimes I know it's hard to get these things done, and I've seen teams that like to add tasks for refactoring into their backlog, and that's where the arguments start. Refactoring is just a piece of the software development life, and like you said, if your code is getting messy, the estimates for your tasks are going to go up, right? If I have to clean out the building lot before I can start putting the building down, it's going to take more time. That's just physics and common sense, I think. So if there's a lot of pushback from management because these activities are not seen as value adding, then just wrap them into the story.
Just put them as like criteria for done, which I've done that before, where just at the tail end of the acceptance criteria, that it wasn't just that it passed the test, but it was also refactored and passed the test again. 20, did I get your name correctly?
Yes.
Yes. What's your opinion on this?
I was going to say, I believe that was Adam that just spoke before me, is added into the ticket. We have one particular team out of many where the manager that manages the sales and things has been just promising unreasonable timelines. And while we're working on that, it also is causing the team to feel hurried, and their code's pretty brittle in the first place. And that was my advice to them, is add it as part of your definition of done, unless it's a huge task to refactor that would be its own story. Just make it a little bit at a time is better than nothing at all.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. Ruth, do you have a comment on this?
Yeah, I've been thinking about what people have been saying too, and we talk about conversations, and what I think the key thing is, even if at the lowest level, the developers who are doing the refactoring, if they can have the correct conversation and explain this in a way for the product owner to truly understand what what is the value in the refactoring. That is good. However, the product owner needs to be able to have the skill and ability to communicate above and to the business. So there's some training and conversation that we can't really just expect the product owner to be able to communicate this. And I think as coaches, we should work with product owners to help have them have these conversations and be able to express what the value is to the business and to executives to make sure that refactoring is part of product development.
Right. And if you think of the Deming circle, of what most of Agile's foundation comes from, it's not just about what we do in the planning, developing and doing, but it's also the refinement. It's how do we improve this thing that we do, not just the stuff that we're building, but how we build it. And I still think it was Jorg you mentioned earlier, which is that's the responsibility of the team. I kind of find it weird that we've kind of passed that off to saying that that's a management decision versus, hey, we own building this code and we are the ones that need to be putting in the effort here. We need to be the ones doing this. And I think just obfuscating that off to management problem, I think that's kind of cheating a little bit. Tracy, you had your hand back up. Did you have a comment on this?
I spent the last 9 months as a product owner on a team that had a very large legacy code base as well as some new products that we were working on. And one of the things that I see with code development is that, yes, developers do need to incorporate, refactoring and unit tests as part of their development cycle. But one of the things that I feel pretty strongly about is that it shouldn't even be a conversation with management or the product owner. It's just part of the process that they need to change their thinking on. That if you're breaking down a story into tasks, and one of the tasks is to, create some new, user control, some small user control, you wouldn't have a separate task for unit tests and refactoring. That gets done as part of the work to create that control. And I think that that's one of the problems that many teams have, is that they think that those things are separate. They're not. They're part of the cycle. They're part of the process. And once you start breaking it down, then management can say, well, we really don't need to be doing that work. But if you incorporate it as part of the cycle and don't even break it out as tasks, it's much harder for them to push back and say no to it.
Now,
if that makes sense.
It does. And you said something very interesting. So you started off as a member of the team and then worked your way to a product owner position.
Yes.
And your background is more technical than it is more from the business analyst side. Is that correct?
Yes, that was the part that I actually struggled with in that position, was the business domain knowledge. Mm-hmm. But the technical side of it, I understood very well, and it was interesting because I could be an advocate to management and to our customers to say, no, if we want to do this right, we really need to do it this way.
Okay. So is it your belief, and I know this, I might step on a landmine by saying this, is that somebody with a technical background in a product owner position, do you think that they have a little bit more, empathy for the team and what they need to do? Okay.
Yeah, and I think, that's a double-edged sword. I think that at times they can have too much empathy, because you've still got to be that advocate for the customers and understand their needs and be able to give them what they want.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that it goes both ways. You've got to be empathetic for both sides, and it's harder when you don't have, as much of the business domain to be able to draw from. So that, for me, that was very much a learning, the learning curve on that was steep. So the other piece to this is that a development team needs to understand how to do refactoring and unit testing well as part of the development cycle. And this is where I think it's harder for teams to get support from product owners and from management. They've got to have time to learn those skills and to practice those skills. I feel deeply passionate about that this is something that, developers need time to go off and learn that, and they rarely get the opportunity to. They can't be efficient at it at work if they don't have time to go do it in a safe environment. Mm-hmm. So that's another piece of the puzzle. This is a big, complex thing that has many moving parts that, there's no one size fits all for everybody, but I do know that part of it, if they don't have that understanding and that way to go learn it and practice it, then they're going to have a much harder time being successful at it, in developing production code.
Sure.
That's just my two pennies on that.
Well, thank you for that. Raven, good to hear from you again. I haven't heard you for a few months.
Hi, thanks, Ray. You know what? I know we have to go into our other questions. The young lady that just spoke said volumes for me, and I wish I could have the time to pick your ear about a number of things. But one thing that I have a question on, and I totally agree with everything you stated. But in the interest of being a devil's advocate, in adding in the refactoring and not explicitly stating it or making it visible, is that going against some of our values and principles here in agility, where we make our work visible to everyone as a visual radiator, as the Scrum Master is supposed to do? And in not doing that, are we not holding ourselves to a certain level of integrity? I guess that's my question to put out there.
That's an interesting perspective. I find that, especially when we're in a good planning meeting and we look at a new user story, that if we're being honest about the Fibonacci number or the level of complexity and uncertainty associated to anything that we're developing, I think that transparency comes out, because typically those higher order, bigger things should be also comprehending the refactoring or the large technical debt that needs to be fixed in order to go implement that particular feature. Now, whether the task is explicit, meaning that there's a post-it note or something that says that we're going to be doing refactoring, I think there's that boundary condition of where, if you look at how the good planning meeting should be, it should be the first part is about sizing the stories, and the second part is about the team breaking down the work. As a product owner, I really don't care how many post-it notes they go off and create. That's not my job now. That's their job to go do that. They're breaking down their work. So I guess I don't. I guess what I'm trying to say is I think it happens automatically, but should product owner step in and say, hey, take that task off, take that task off, take that task off, because I don't want any of that clean code stuff. I think the product owner and management's overstepping their boundary. Personally.
I agree with that, because they are telling you the what and the why. We're telling them the how it can be done. And so they will push sometimes and want you to do that, but they shouldn't be defining the how.
Yeah, maybe to add two things. One, to the transparency. If you do it as a definition of done, that's by no way secret. Actually, if product owners don't take the time to understand what quality level they're going to get as a commitment from the team, they're already in a bad position. So that should not be a problem of transparency. And the other thing you should consider is talk about the future. If you do this, what does it mean for further requests that definitely will be coming up? And the stories you're talking about, then you're already preparing with the refactoring. So if you want to have security on the next three things, which you are already seeing on the horizon, let's be thorough from the beginning. It's totally different from let's do something technical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and it also, you're not just saving time and possibility of breaking in the future, just your technical debt costs money. And a lot of the times the people that are pushing back because they think they're saving money. If you can get them to understand the snowballing effect of cost if it's not taken care of.
Right, or the effect on their brand eventually, because once quality goes down, you start losing customers. You don't want to have that. So the top question up here is from Paula, and it was from actually last year. It took a while to get up the votes to get to the top here, so I'm glad it finally got up here. How do you move teams to go beyond the Agile rituals and move them more into the Agile mindset? Basically taking initiative, raising issues, proposing changes rather than being passive. And this kind of dovetails actually to the last question that we were doing. Who would like to start on this one?
I'll jump in first. So I found that teams sometimes are eager to please, and in that case, they're eager to please their Agile coach. And I've actually had teams that would come after I stopped engaging with them, and they come in a couple of months later and say, "See, we're still running retrospectives like I taught us," and and I'd go, "Oh my, that's not what I was trying to teach you." So my point is that you want to make sure that the teams are doing the rituals for the right reasons, and one of the wrong reasons is to please the coach that they're following what they're doing. And I think this is Ray, where you really shine with your example of not picking up the pen during a retrospective, right? Having them lead the rituals so they can start adjusting them to meet their needs, not what the coach or the Scrum Master wants to do.
Right. And for people who don't know that story, one of my techniques of getting people to engage is that I typically will not pick up the pen as a coach. I place it down in the middle on a chair or some other place, and we all have an awkward staring contest of who's going to go pick up the pen. I know it's not going to be me because I want the team to actually engage and to own it.
If I'd like to comment on this one. So the question was, how do you move them? And I think start out with teams as coaches that come to us in various states. Some of them are not at all familiar with the new practices and the new ceremonies and things. And it takes a little bit of time to get them comfortable. And to that point, you often just get them to actually practice the ritual sort of as they're intended and to make small modifications along the way. The challenge becomes creating safety with that team so that they understand that overall they're going to own the process, right? That yes, you're going to bring them some new and different ways of working, but the fundamental basis of agility is that the team becomes much more self-managed and they own the way their rituals happen. Generally speaking, I see many teams will evolve to good, healthy stand-ups, just given a little bit of support and direction. But it's generally in some of the other practices, particularly in retrospectives, where perhaps not every voice is being heard, and someone needs to take the lead to help create safety in that environment so that people will feel as though their voice is being heard and that their contributions have value. And I think if you can create sufficient safety, supporting teams as they move beyond the ritual becomes much easier.
So I think it comes with the time. So for me, it's like when you learn something new at the beginning, you need to copy and try to be concentrated on doing all the rituals, etc. And then with the time, it will be something natural. So I think you don't need really the team. You just need the team to, take the time and develop the agile mindset.
Sure. So you're saying that first it's okay to copy what they see from others. Do you find though that sometimes there's this notion of cargo cults, which are you copy everything and you expect to see the results, but reality is you're just sort of you're not really understanding the undertones of it. Do you think that potentially retrospectives help in this way to kind of enhance?
Yeah, I think it's important as the team is learning this. So if we are talking about new teams doing agile or any sort of agile methodology, it's important for the team to see the value on it. Not just to follow a methodology because the fact of following a methodology, but to see the value. So I think it's important, the retrospectives and everything, and keep that always visible.
Mm-hmm. No, I agree with that as well. Others, do you have any inputs?
Yeah, I would like to add something. My name's
Sure.
Akinka. So going back to the question, how do you move your team to go beyond agile rituals? I think one of the first things, at least in my experience, that I've done is to always let people understand the reason why we actually even do these things in the first place. A lot of times, even though people do things, you'll be shocked that when you ask them, they don't know why they do it. They just see it as, and that's why they see it as a ritual. And when people see things as a ritual, then they would never understand beyond it, and they would never be active into getting involved. So one of the things I believe to answer that question will be for everybody involved in the process to understand the reason why they're doing it. So that way it makes them own that process, and it also makes them get creative into, okay, so there should be a better way to do this since they understand the goal. All right, but if they don't understand the goal, they're just coming to retro thinking whatever the Scrum Master says or whatever the coach says. But if they understand the goal, they will even be able to question you and even challenge you and come up with different ways to say, okay, you know what, let's do this better since this is the goal we're trying to accomplish. And that way it makes everybody safe, it makes everybody more vocal, it makes people become more creative, and it also gives you the opportunity for them to even want to try it out because they understand what you're trying to accomplish with that goal. So I think that if you make them understand it, and even if you coach them time after time, after a while, it's so easy for them to pick it up because they understand the goal of each of those meetings and what we're trying to accomplish with each of those meetings.
Sure. Do you find, though, that in that type of environment that there has to be an environment of safe to fail? That, because if you do those overarching goals that way, they're bound to sometimes be successful and then other times not. And the not is where we learn.
I do think you're right that it makes a big difference in having an organization where it feels safe to fail, but to at least get it within the team to feel safe to fail and talk and encourage people when they do have those difficult conversations, notice them happening, catch them being good kind of as you're doing your meeting, so they realize the things you're really praising and calling out are not just showing up at the meeting, but that positive participation.
Right.
And I've found it very effective to coach a person individually to be a facilitator in a meeting. And then by facilitating and trying to draw out those characteristics in others, they're really focusing on them and they internalize them a lot more. And we just pass some of that facilitation around sprint by sprint. Not always. Sometimes, they all get to sit back and just be the dev team and have a coach, or we don't have scrum masters right now because of budget constraints, but coaches help. And that was part of why I did it, but I started seeing some real benefit. At first we were only having the senior people lead, and I realized the benefit was huge. Another thing is just work on your overall team building, and a nice little book that you can get on audio or paper that really pushes some of the characteristics we want of a Scrum team is 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. It's a leadership table, and it talks about things like trust and having healthy debates and things like that, which sometimes just hearing it in that fable-like setting helps them see, hey, I need that in my team too. That's what we're going for with the retro.
Right. So go ahead.
Sorry, this is Leah. I was also saying at some point as a coach, and it's certainly not in the beginning as they're going through this, but there's a point where as a coach I need to kind of tap into my own humility and realize that even my existence in some of those ceremonies may cause the team to be holding back a bit on their own, taking ownership of some changes. And often I just don't show up to a retrospective and see what comes out of it. And it may be going against something that I taught them, but to the point of learning to fail and letting them learn more from failures than me saying, hey, I've seen this on many teams before, guys. You can try it, but it's not going to work out, you know? That
Sure.
I need to sometimes be very aware that my presence will be changing the way the team is interacting in some of those rituals.
No, I agree with that. I tend to doodle these little network diagrams when I'm in the meetings with people, and I just sort of make little dots on a page, and then I start drawing lines between where the communication is going. And about 15 minutes in, you can kind of start to see some emergent patterns about, people seem to be like directing a conversation to just one individual, the Scrum Master or the manager or the product owner, versus why isn't the team talking to the rest of the team? And I think you're right that sometimes you need to be late to a meeting and allow them to get started and do some of that work. And if the mindset is in place, they will have started and they will start doing those rituals because they know that we're going to do planning meeting now. Scrum Master's not here. Oh, well, we'll just get in and do it.
So I just wanted to point out, so we're talking about the Agile mindset, and really the core of Agile are the values and the principles. So if the team doesn't really understand and go beyond the rituals in understanding how the rituals relate to the values and principles, I think that we're missing something. So we need to clearly communicate to the team as rituals relate to those values and principles. Map those out. Talk about it. Why do we do this thing? Why are we in this ritual? Because it satisfies this principle, or it's related to this value. That's how we get a Agile mindset mapping to the actual work and the activities behind it. So I think it's important to always bring that up, that what we do relates to the values and principles. Values and principles are what Agile is. It's not the individual rituals.
I agree. Are there any other comments on this, or do we want to pivot?
Yeah, hi, Ashutosh here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So my take on this is as an agile coach, I would basically challenge my team in retrospectives that, yes, we have been following rituals now. Now, what is that thing you have done in this current sprint, which basically brings them to the mindset issue, right? So what is that one idea or one thing what you have done which now you think will make you move from doing agile to being agile? So it could be one idea per sprint, or have we done anything on how have we become more adaptable than predictable? I think that would be the question which I would be asking my teams, which will give me an idea that, okay, are they still in the predictability mindset or are they in the adaptability mindset? Have they really moved or transformed from a predictable to an adaptable mindset? I would take in a retrospective.
No, that's good. Are there other comments on this one? Do we want to pivot?
Let's pivot.
Okay, here's this next question. So, and I hate this word, by the way. What are the best practices for non-functional requirements in Agile? I hate non-functional requirements as a name. It's like it doesn't work, or it's something that doesn't go into the product or something. Anyway, does anyone want to kick this one off?
I can just second that. If you want to measure a time of execution, if you want to make sure that something happens in a certain quality, this is always in context of use. So it's always in context of function. Try to get it into the test cases. Try to get it into all the requirements. Make it testable and not non-functionable. And talk about why you want it, because there is always a reason why you're discussing this. Very often a misunderstood use case.
I agree with Ray that NFRs are getting a bad rap. Fundamentally, these are things that provide guide rails for any particular applications, whether it's security related. Usually that's where a lot of NFRs come in, or non-functional requirements. I'm a firm believer that anything you need to do to a product or a service to get it to function well is a requirement. And I don't know why we distinguish between functional and non-functional requirements. I actually think this is baggage we're bringing from perhaps in the late 80s or something like that.
Right.
There's a book was written on evolutionary architecture last year and was published that actually makes a really good case for developing fitness functions that actually maintain the guardrails and provide tests to let you know when you're falling out of either performance or security or other types of these non-functional activity. I highly recommend it.
What did you say the book was again?
Hang on just one second. Let me come back to you. Okay.
Yeah, could you hold on for just 1 second? If you're not currently speaking, please mute your phone, please. I think it was Ruth.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I'm muting you. Mute your phone, please. Thank you. Okay. Whew. So we were talking about that book. So did we know what the book title is, or she's going back to go get it?
Yeah, I think she said she was going to look for the actual title. So,
okay. So, I fully agree with what Linda just said there, is that the entities, things like, the overall kind of operational envelope of where my software needs to work and other things, those need to just be hard and fast requirements that we have in our system. They're not non-functional in space. They're part of the function. So I think
Hi, this is JK. This is my question. So, first
JK,
of all, really cool that this. I feel like I could test it on The Price is Right, but just got called down because my question came up. So, the
you won.
thing we struggle with is do we make this a part of the sprint, because a non-functional requirement is never done, I think, and when we look to report on how we're moving things through the queue, I guess people are complaining that these non-functional requirements will just kind of linger there in progress forever, because a non-functional, and maybe that's the wrong term that I'm using, is never complete. So that's how we're struggling with.
So can I ask you,
if it's just a user story or a requirement, how do we say when it's done, and how do we put it in a sprint?
Can I ask you a clarifying question on how these get rolled into your overall program? Typically, early on, let's say in early construction phase, or if I'm just in concepts, some of these requirements, like having to go serve 1 million users, are really not the requirement at that point. It's got to serve 5 users, and it has to work in a smaller operational envelope space early in the life cycle. But as it increases throughout its life of the project, conditions of done or conditions of release include different degrees of those, as you call them, non-functional requirements. Do you find that in your release planning, when you're actually physically shipping something out, that you have a different set of release criteria than you do with your story criteria?
Well, I think that's what we're struggling with, is how do we make sure that we don't lose track, I guess, of all the non-functional requirements? Because I don't think we do a good job right now, at least in my company, of tracking them very well.
Okay.
As you said, it's great when the project first starts out, but as we get rolling, how does the QA team and even the developer themselves keep in mind that, we have a certain metric for the web page loading or the batch script running, or, we have to maintain data for 7 years or whatever the functional requirement would be.
Right. And the way that we did it is we rolled some of that into different levels, which one level would, of course, the story. The next level up was that what was it being released to? So the release criteria contained conditions that said that it needed to pass X number of hours of stress testing and other of those types of requirements, or security testing and other penetration set testing. And we found that once we added that level and glue those to also the themes of what we were doing as the product was getting assembled and getting larger, we found that that was the best way for us to track it. How about others?
So my take on that is, can we have NFRs as a part of the MVP? Either implicit or explicitly. Can we mention that? That was one. And my experience in this has been that essentially either we do, again, sorry for using this word NFR, because I think I agree with the earlier speaker that it's a requirement at the end of the day. We either tend to do it too early in the day, whereby we defeat the purpose later on when the code gets added, the test cases don't really sum up, or we do it too late in the cycle. At least the one area where we struggled was to find out the optimum time to do these requirements or to test these requirements.
Pamela, do you have something on this?
Yes, we constantly struggle with the question, especially when we have to do a lot of data work or database work, ETL, et cetera, that are quote unquote non-functioning, but they're absolutely necessary to get the products to the customer. So I've heard several different pros and cons about putting it in your backlog as a story. But to me, in order for us to know that we are accounting for it, not only for velocity of our team, but we also need to make sure that it's more process oriented, but we need to make sure that we have all of those box checked before we go in, like security, like permissions and everything like that. How do we account for that? Because we use Jira, and right now we are putting it as stories in Jira. We're writing the stories a little differently in the acceptance criteria, but without that, then there is no project, because we need that to get out what we need to the customer.
Yeah, the way that we addressed it is that we understood that as the system was being built, that it was going through a kind of an overarching life cycle of development, which is it starts off as an opportunity. The opportunity moves to a concept. Concept then moves to a candidate. Candidate then moves to a solution. And in each of those phases, the system has a different set of those requirements that it has to pass. So a concept is not going to have as many security type of testing done to it, because it's just a concept at this point. Where when we get into more of the solution space, when we get past the candidate, it absolutely has to pass those before that even touches a customer. And in certain cases, depending on, because the quality was different. If it was a medical product that we were shipping versus, say, a consumer product, we would also have a sliding scale on what did it mean for a solution being shipped into that market segment. So those were conditions that from a QA team perspective, as well as from a development team perspective overall, we're tracking a set that was done in both because we were heavy users of automated testing. We had those automated test suites would turn on when we entered that new phase. That was one way that we tracked it. Is just we had more tests that needed to be passed to be shipped.
I'm trying to do something similar to what Ray explained with the teams, and I try to get into Jira. A story says we now have a confirmation, whatever it is, certification statement that whatever we're going to test from now on will fulfill these needs. So we agree with quality, maybe even customers, that yes, this is what we're going to do to protect this quality with every new shipment. And setting this up and doing this test is really a delivery and a promise of future quality that is quite good as a story, broken down however you do it. But after that, it just gets into automated testing as much as possible.
No, that's great. Like I said, I've heard both, people not accounting for it and people are. And we're pretty new to the Agile world. I've been doing it for 7 years, but in my company, it's pretty new. So there are some people say, yes, put the technical stories in, and some people say no. But I think when you're a newer team, it actually is beneficial if you just put it in there so people can see it.
Yeah, what we found was, and we had certain products that were being shipped into medical devices. And the one thing that we had to be very careful with was traceability. And traceability test that we did verify these things. So we at least had a culture internally to our company that we knew that if we missed that step, there was some punitive damages that could come back at us legally. So I think the challenges that I've seen with most teams that are trying to go capture these are the ones that may not feel that there's a direct, legal impact from them. But, product recalls are pretty expensive. And even if it's just a software product recall or an update, those get pricey. So do we want to pivot to the last question since we've got about 10 more minutes left?
Yeah, let's pivot.
So the next question, let's see. Jorg, this is your question, man. I'm gonna let you read it.
Yeah. How do you act if terminology is intentionally misused? For example, if a manager declares somebody to be product owner, but actually he wants a team lead that controls technical work in detail, and he misuses the terminology, for example, and the many reasons to sound modern but keep on doing the same thing, or just because he doesn't understand or whatever, and suddenly people start to go talking about terms they don't understand. What do you do?
I think one thing is that you got that kind of a rose called by any other name, still a rose. We had a problem where calling the product owners in the engineering team was upsetting people above us that held the control for the marketing and sales of it, because they felt like, they were planning the direction we were going and they were the user's vision, and the product owner worked with them. And we threw in product development owner, it's an intentional misuse, but meant to clarify them from the role, a different role in the company, that where they were feeling like there was ambiguity between the two roles by using it. So sometimes it might be they're really trying to differentiate, but sometimes they may, as you said, be just calling a rose something else, and it's still a rose. It's still a team lead.
I think that the simplest way is just calling them out on it, but in a friendly and open way. When I see someone misusing terms, I talk to them, but preface it with saying, maybe this is what's working for you, and that's great, but let's call a spade, and an apple. You don't go around calling GPUs a CPU and vice versa, because people would laugh at you. So why are you misusing the terms here? But if it's a structural problem, like with the upper layers of management, maybe it's good to just sit down and write out the roles and responsibilities and
right.
Yeah, and that's just it. Is we have purchased a number of small companies, and they're all under one roof, and so that person is ultimately the direction of the team up above us, but the PO on our level is the direction of the build.
May I add something? This is sorry.
No, go ahead.
This is Ali Reza. So I believe we shouldn't care about the roles. The roles are hats we put on maybe 2-3 people even. Like the PO role is something the technical lead can help. We need one person to say the final say, but I don't care if I call it product owner, technical product manager, whatever we want to call it. As an agile coach, we should make sure that responsibility is taken care of by one person or a number of people, however we want to do it, but it's just taken care of. That's what I care about, rather than, because a lot of companies, they have POs. The PO doesn't know what to do because the responsibilities are not set. That we don't know what we want from this role.
And I would say also sometimes, back to our conversation about refactoring, not putting it out there for refactoring's sake, but to talk through the business value of that. Even here within terminology discussions, I really try to focus on, taking a moment and saying, is there a problem that the terminology is being misused? And then, what's it to the team? What is it to the business? And so if what's happening in this example, right, a PO as a label for a team lead, well, perhaps now the product owner is going from defining scope and what, but going into, as a technical leader, how the team should do it. And that may be causing dysfunctions within that team. And so then we can focus on that and let, coach with the team to the fact of, this terminology or these roles, there's a reason they're separated, right? And they're causing the team not to be empowered or self-organized. Let's focus on that. And let's also remember, as a coach, is it a problem for the team, or are they functioning okay right now, even with that misuse of terminology?
And sometimes you can do a RACI for the different titles you're using and define really what accountability or responsibility that role has. And sometimes you'll find out that they're misusing it just because another company used it wrong, not intentionally to put someone in a wrong role. But it also might pull out, hey, this role shouldn't have this piece in it, by just getting it down on paper and being able to talk with senior leadership that way.
Yeah, I found that collaborative chartering has been that's been my key tool for kind of working all that out. Sitting down with people and writing down, this is the title and these are the roles and responsibilities of that title. I have hit so many times when somebody says, well, wait a minute, you put that over there, but that's my job, and being able to work out those lumps early on is vital. And I think we conflate a lot of things too, which is the stepping into the point of, and at least in big companies, I know that we've had problems with product owner being the one accountable for the product value exclusively. If it doesn't come out to be, of high value, it was the product owner's fault. Well, that's not as clear when you're talking about a big system that you're delivering. You you're going to have to really work it out as what's the responsibilities of the team to the individuals. And I think that saves a lot of time. We have about time for about one more comment. Does anyone want to dive in and hit this one home?
I can add something. This is Elirza again. So I was in Agile Open with Al Shalway was talking about something which was about where when you hit like a stone when the management doesn't want to do Agile, and they might even hate the word Agile, and you want to like do what you think is right, and like as a team or like the company needs to move toward Agile, you remove all these terminologies and you try to come up with these are the things that we want to do, and usually we get a good consensus, like even from management, that they want to do it, they just don't know what it means. So a PO, when I go to a company which is well established, they have different roles, and I go to them and say, let's change the titles to product owner. A lot of times they might even say, no, I don't want to do it. But the underneath of it is if they know why we need that role and what are the things that role is doing, they might be online. But if I force them to change it to this terminology, they might resist. So that's the main concept I'm looking after when I'm doing these changes in the companies.
Sure. No, hey, you hit it home. Thank you very much for that. Hey, we're finished for this month. Thank you all for attending, and also thank you for making this podcast really popular. Right now, we have over 1,000 people signed up for the Agile Coaching Network, and we've had record attendance over the last couple of months. So I appreciate you guys getting the word out. The podcast, the 27 that we currently have done so far, we're up to 18,500 replays, which is pretty darn good. If you guys want to visit me, I'm going to be actually in Gdansk, Poland. So Adam, I know you're over there. I'll be March 4th through the 8th. I'll be there doing some company visits, but I'm always free in the evening time frame in case something comes up to where we want to have a chat about Agile. I'll be at Agile India in March 18th through the 23rd. I'll be at the Agile Alliance booth. Come by, stop by, and have a conversation there. If you're an attendee, I think we're giving away, like Agile Alliance memberships, which is pretty cool. And then after that, I'll be over in Deliver Agile April, and potentially I'll also be at the XP event, but I'm still trying to see whether or not I can fit that in. So thank you, everyone. Thanks for the participation, and I hope to hear you guys all next month. This podcast is provided by the Agile Alliance for educational and informative purposes only. To find out more information about the member-supported Agile Alliance, please go to agilealliance.org to find out about more upcoming events, as well as different programs that are available to help you with your Agile journey.